The thing is, I still made her coffee that morning. Hazelnut creamer, 2 sugars, just the way she liked it. I even ironed her favorite blouse because I thought maybe, just maybe, a smooth shirt and a good breakfast could stitch up the unraveling threads between us. Pathetic, right? My name's Daryl. Not Daryl with a trendy twist or Darius like some movie star. Just plain old Daryl, the guy who still believed that if you loved someone hard enough, they might stop seeing you as background noise. That morning, she didn't even look at the coffee. She just tapped away on her phone, giggling at something, eyes lighting up in a way they hadn't in months. Not because of me. No, those smiles had become reserved for someone else. I wasn't stupid. I could feel the shift in the air, like standing under a storm you can't see yet but know is coming. But I didn't say anything. I just packed her lunch, kissed her cheek like a fool, and told her to have a good day. She barely mumbled back. I spent the rest of the afternoon wandering around the house, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, organizing drawers just so I wouldn't think too hard about who was making her laugh like that. At sunset, she texted, said she was crashing at her friend Mallory's place because they had too much wine and it wasn't safe to drive. I wanted to believe it. God, I wanted to. I sat in the kitchen with the untouched coffee still sitting there, cold and bitter, just like everything between us. And that's when something inside me finally broke. I knew where Mallory lived, and something didn't sit right. Mallory was out of town visiting her sick mother. Claire didn't know I knew that, so I drove. I didn't even bother changing out of my stupid world's okayest husband pajama pants. I drove across town, heart pounding, hoping I was wrong, begging to be wrong. Her car wasn't at Mallory's apartment, but it was parked outside the Sundown Inn, a sleazy little motel that smelled like cheap aftershave and broken promises. My hands shook as I stared at it from across the street. I didn't know what to do. Should I barge in? Should I call her? Should I just drive away and pretend I didn't see it? In the end, I did something worse. Something infinitely sadder. I texted her. Just one simple line. Come home or don't. I won't be here either way. Then I drove back home, packed one bag, and left the spare key on the counter next to the still untouched coffee. I didn't even lock the door behind me. The next morning, she woke up alone at dawn, probably in some scratchy motel bed with whatever stranger made her laugh again. She checked her phone and found the message that ended everything. I didn't go far that night, just to a dingy motel about 15 minutes out of town. The kind of place with peeling paint on the walls and a vending machine that ate your dollars without a second thought. I didn't even care. I just needed to be anywhere but home. Anywhere but in the house we once called ours. I remember lying on that paper-thin mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, feeling like the world's biggest fool. Part of me kept waiting for the door to burst open, for Claire to rush in sobbing, saying it was all a misunderstanding, that she loved me, that she chose me. But the door stayed shut. My phone stayed silent except for that one little read receipt under my text, mocking me. I barely slept. At around 4 o'clock in the morning, I got up and stood by the window, looking out at the empty parking lot. A drunk guy was passed out across 2 spaces. A couple was arguing near a pickup truck. And somewhere in some motel room not too far away, Claire was probably still asleep in the arms of whoever had taken my place without so much as a fight. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in muted pinks and grays, my chest felt hollow, like there was nothing left inside me but dust. I thought about all the little things I'd done for her over the years. Anniversaries she forgot, surprises she brushed off, apologies I gave even when I hadn't done anything wrong. It hit me then harder than anything. She had stopped loving me a long time ago. I was just too blind to see it. Still, part of me, the stupid part, hoped she'd call. Hoped she'd at least try to explain, to beg me to come back. Instead, around 6:15 a.m., I got a notification. She had finally opened my text. No reply, no missed call, just silence. I checked the motel's flimsy little Wi-Fi and logged onto our joint bank account. I don't know why. Maybe because I wanted to torture myself some more. And that's when the second blow came. 2 charges overnight. One from the Sundown Inn and one from a 24-hour diner across the street. Both paid for by Claire's card. Both time-stamped barely an hour apart. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was parading it around like it was no big deal, like I was already a forgotten chapter. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, feeling sick. There wasn't even anger yet, just the slow, awful sinking feeling, like I was being swallowed whole by my own stupidity. I didn't deserve this. I had never been perfect, but damn it, I deserved better than being traded out like some old pair of shoes. I thought about driving back home, grabbing the rest of my things, maybe leaving her a letter or something dramatic like in the movies. But the more I sat there, the more it hit me. There was nothing left to say. The Claire I married was already gone. She had been gone long before the sundown in, before the giggling texts, before the nights she claimed to be too tired to talk. That was the real betrayal, wasn't it? Not the motel, not the other guy. It was how easily she let me become invisible. And that's when a new plan started to form. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but because for the first time in years, I finally realized I needed to save myself. After sitting in that dingy motel room long enough to feel like the walls were closing in, I finally grabbed my keys and left. I didn't know exactly where I was going, just that it had to be anywhere that didn't smell like despair and broken promises. I ended up driving toward the outskirts of town, a place we used to go when we first started dating. Back when Claire would laugh so hard she'd snort and pretend to be embarrassed. Back when I mattered. It was this old park by the river. Nothing fancy. A couple of trails, some rusty swings, a half-collapsed gazebo with graffiti etched into the wood. I parked and just sat there, the engine ticking as it cooled, watching the river crawl by like even it wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere. My mind kept replaying everything, the last year, the little signs I ignored. The sudden girls' nights that didn't add up. The way she guarded her phone like it was the nuclear launch codes. The way she flinched sometimes when I touched her, like my hands were a burden she had to endure. And yet I stayed. God. I stayed because I thought love meant you stayed no matter how bad it hurt. I sat there for what must have been hours, lost in my own pathetic memories, until my phone buzzed again. I jumped like I'd been shocked. For one glorious, stupid second, I thought, maybe it's her. Maybe she realized what she'd done. Maybe she missed me. It wasn't her. It was an automated message from my phone carrier. My family plan had just been updated. Claire had removed me from the account. No goodbye. No sorry. Not even the decency of an awkward explanation. She had erased me like a mistake she didn't want on her record anymore. That was the second time that morning my stomach twisted into a hard, ugly knot. I put my phone down on the passenger seat and just stared at it. Numb. I wasn't even sure how long I sat like that, motionless, while normal life buzzed around me. Joggers passing by, kids laughing on the swings, someone walking their dog past my car. Life kept moving. I was the only one stuck. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes, feeling the hot sting behind my eyelids. I didn't cry. Not really. It was more like leaking sadness, like my soul had sprung a leak and I couldn't plug it. I hated myself for still missing her, for still loving her even after everything, for wanting answers I knew I'd never get. And most of all, I hated that somewhere deep inside, there was a small, broken part of me that wondered if maybe this was somehow my fault. Maybe if I had been more exciting, more successful, less boring. Maybe if I had been enough. But that's the cruel thing about betrayal. It doesn't just steal your partner. It robs you of your own self-worth, too. I knew I couldn't sit there forever. Eventually, I was going to have to figure out where to go, what to do next. I was going to have to start over from scratch. No home, no wife, no plan. But for now, I just stayed there in that busted old park in my stupid pajama pants, watching the river and feeling like the ghost of a man I used to be. By the time I finally peeled myself out of that car seat, my back ached like I'd aged 20 years overnight. I tossed my phone into the glove compartment without even looking at it. What was the point? No missed calls, no desperate texts begging me to come home. Claire had made her choice, and she wasn't losing any sleep over it. I drove aimlessly for a while, just trying to keep the wheels moving so my mind wouldn't settle into another endless loop of self-blame. I ended up in a diner on the edge of nowhere, one of those places that smelled like burnt coffee and fryer grease. It was mostly empty except for a couple of truckers in a booth and an elderly waitress who looked like she'd seen it all and stopped caring a long time ago. I slid into a booth and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a stack of pancakes I didn't even want. When they came, I just stared at them, syrup pooling on the plate like some kind of sticky metaphor for my life. I must have looked like a zombie because the waitress asked if I was okay. I gave her a half smile and lied through my teeth like always. Just tired, I said. Truth was, I wasn't just tired. I was bone-deep exhausted. Not from a lack of sleep, but from carrying a love that had become a one-way burden. Claire had stopped loving me long before last night. She had just finally gathered the guts to act on it. And still, part of me sat there wondering what I had done wrong. Had I been too boring? Too predictable? Was my love too easy? Did she get tired of the same old Daryl who brought her coffee every morning and ironed her shirts and thought that was enough? I stabbed a piece of pancake with my fork and watched it crumble, feeling an ugly kinship with it. That's what I was now. Crumbs of a life that used to feel whole. As I sat there pretending to eat, pretending to be fine, my mind kept replaying 1,000 little moments. Not the big fights or the dramatic scenes you see in movies, but the slow, quiet ways she had pulled away. The way she started putting her phone face down on the table. The sudden disinterest in planning vacations. The way "I love you" became something she said out of habit, not out of feeling. Death by 1,000 cuts. That's how it happened. And the worst part? I had let it happen. I had clung to a version of Claire that didn't exist anymore because I was too scared to admit I was alone, even while lying next to her. When the check came, I paid in cash, leaving a tip that was probably too big for a plate of uneaten pancakes. I didn't have anywhere to go. Not really. Home wasn't home anymore. It was just a house full of ghost memories and broken promises. I thought about calling someone, my brother maybe, or my old college buddy Mason. But the idea of explaining everything felt too heavy. I didn't want pity. I didn't want advice. I didn't even want company. I just wanted the pain to stop gnawing at me like a starving animal. So I got back into my car, turned the key, and just drove. No destination, no plan, just me. A half-empty gas tank, and a heart that felt like it had been left out in the rain too long. As the sun rose higher and the world around me woke up, I realized something that should have been obvious all along. Claire didn't destroy me. I was already halfway destroyed before she even touched that motel room door handle. I just didn't know it yet. The highway stretched out in front of me like some endless gray ribbon. And I kept driving because sitting still felt like admitting defeat. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need to. My mind was already loud enough, filled with static and replayed conversations that never actually happened. The apologies she never gave. The questions I never asked. The answers I was too scared to hear. At some point, I realized I was heading toward the coast. We used to talk about taking a trip there. Claire loved the ocean. She said it made her feel small in a good way, like her problems didn't matter so much when she stood next to something that ancient and wide. We never did make that trip. Life always got in the way. Work, bills, obligations. And now here I was, finally making the drive. Alone, in yesterday's clothes, dragging my broken heart along for the ride. I stopped at a gas station off Route 17. One of those places with flickering neon lights and a bathroom that smelled like someone had given up on life inside it. I filled the tank, grabbed a bottle of water and a stale sandwich, and sat on the curb outside, chewing mechanically while watching cars speed past. Everyone else had somewhere to be. I was just running away from a place that wasn't home anymore. While I sat there, my phone buzzed again. For a second, my heart jumped. I hated that even after everything, some stupid part of me still hoped it was Claire. It wasn't. It was a spam text. Congratulations. You've been selected for a cruise to the Bahamas. I laughed then. Really laughed. The kind of hollow, broken sound that made the gas station clerk glance at me through the window like I might start stripping naked and screaming at the sky. Maybe I wasn't that far off. A free cruise. What a joke. I couldn't even hold together a marriage, and now the universe thought I deserved a vacation. I deleted the message without replying and sat there for a long time, picking at the sandwich, letting the sun bake the top of my head. That's when I realized I couldn't go back. Not even to pick up my things. Not to argue, not to beg, not to demand closure I'd never get. Claire had made her choice long before she ever slipped into another man's bed. She chose herself. Maybe it was time I finally chose myself, too. Not in some movie montage, makeover, inspirational music kind of way. I wasn't about to magically find myself by surfing or getting a tattoo or running a marathon. I didn't even know what I wanted. I just knew I didn't want to spend another minute giving my soul to someone who looked at me like an inconvenience. I tossed the half-eaten sandwich into a trash can and got back into my car, feeling a little lighter and a lot lonelier. The road ahead blurred slightly as I pulled back onto the highway, but I didn't wipe my eyes. Let the tears fall. Let them soak into the steering wheel and the seat and the cheap upholstery. I had held it in for too long, pretending everything was fine while I bled inside. It was time to let the hurt out, even if it drowned me for a while. As the coastline finally came into view, a jagged, beautiful line against the pale blue sky, I realized that maybe, just maybe, surviving wasn't about being strong all the time. Maybe it was about allowing yourself to fall apart when you needed to and trusting that somehow, someday you'd build something new out of the ruins. When I finally pulled into a parking spot overlooking the beach, the ocean was a dark, churning mess under a bruised gray sky. Wind whipped at the few people wandering along the sand, their jackets pulled tight against the cold. It wasn't the sunny, postcard version of the coast Claire used to dream about. It was raw, rough, restless. In other words, it matched me perfectly. I sat in the car for a while, the engine ticking as it cooled, watching the waves pound against the shore. Part of me felt too heavy to move. Another part felt like if I didn't get out, I'd suffocate right there in the driver's seat. So, I forced myself to open the door, step out into the wind, and walk toward the water like a man heading into battle without any armor left. The sand was cold and damp under my sneakers. Every gust of wind stung my face, but it felt good, somehow. Sharp, real, cutting through the numbness I'd been drowning in for months. I wandered aimlessly along the shoreline, hands shoved deep in my pockets, head down. I must have looked pathetic, a lone guy in pajama pants and a wrinkled t-shirt, looking like he'd lost everything and wasn't sure if he wanted to find it again. And maybe that's exactly what I was. As I walked, I found a piece of driftwood half buried in the sand and sat down on it, staring out at the endless gray horizon. I thought about all the promises we made on our wedding day, back when forever seemed like a simple thing to believe in. I thought about every moment I had stayed when maybe I should have left. Every time I had chosen to forgive small slights because I loved her more than I loved my own pride. And still, it hadn't been enough. You can pour everything you have into a person, but if they don't want to drink from that cup anymore, it doesn't matter how much you offer. They'll turn away. They'll find another well. I pulled out my phone again, a stupid habit, hoping for a miracle. Nothing. No missed calls, no messages. Claire had gone completely silent. Not even a "where are you?" or a "we need to talk." It was like I had ceased to exist the moment I stopped being convenient for her. The realization settled on me like a weight. Not rage, not even heartbreak anymore. Just an overwhelming sense of being discarded, forgotten, and somehow that hurt more than any betrayal ever could. A kid ran past me on the beach, laughing wildly as he chased a kite that bucked and spun against the wind. His parents followed behind, bundled up and smiling, waving at him whenever he turned to make sure they were still there. I watched them until they disappeared down the beach, feeling like I was looking through a window into a life that had closed itself off to me. Maybe I would never have that. Maybe I would always be the guy sitting alone on a piece of driftwood, nursing wounds nobody could see. Or maybe, just maybe, this was the necessary demolition before a rebuild. I didn't know yet, but for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't pretending anymore. I was broken. I was lost. And maybe, somehow, that was its own kind of beginning. After what felt like hours sitting by the water, the cold finally crept into my bones, forcing me to move. I wandered back to the car, every step feeling heavier than the last. I didn't have a plan. No grand moment of clarity had struck me like it does in the movies. I was still just existing, floating, I tossed myself into the driver's seat, slammed the door against the howling wind, and stared out through the salt-streaked windshield. For a long time, I didn't even turn the key. I just sat there, letting the sound of the waves muffle the noise inside my own head. It would have been so easy to drive back home, to slip into the old routines, to convince myself I could live with half a heart. People did it all the time, right? Stayed in miserable marriages, wore fake smiles, told themselves it was for the best. I could be one of them. I was good at pretending. But deep down, I knew. I couldn't unsee the way she laughed into her phone. I couldn't unknow that she had chosen someone else long before I found her car parked outside that motel. Some betrayals are too deep to patch over. Some cracks shatter the whole damn foundation. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes, feeling the ache of it in my chest. Not sharp anymore, just this dull, dragging weight that made every breath an effort. I wondered what she was doing at that exact moment. Still with him? Crying? Laughing it off over breakfast? Maybe she felt guilty. Maybe she didn't. Either way, she hadn't tried to reach me. That silence screamed louder than any apology could have. The saddest part? Even if she had called, even if she had sobbed and begged and promised it meant nothing, part of me would have wanted to believe her. Part of me would have stretched out my hands, stitched my own heart back together with hope and delusion. That's the kind of man I was. Pathetic, loyal to a fault. The kind of guy who made coffee for a woman already halfway out the door. But sitting there now, freezing my hands on the steering wheel, watching the ocean thrash against the shore, I realized something important. Loyalty means nothing to someone who sees you as disposable. I deserved more than being someone's backup plan. I deserved more than silence after betrayal. I deserved more than cold coffee and colder shoulders. The realization didn't come with fireworks or swelling music. It was quieter than that. It was just a steady, tired acceptance. I put the car in gear and pulled out of the lot, heading south with no real destination in mind. Somewhere along the way, I passed a sign for a small coastal town I'd never heard of. Fairview Shores, population 3,214. Something about the name made me slow down. Fairview, maybe that's what I needed. A fair view of where I was, of who I had become, of what came next. I pulled into a cheap motel just off the highway. Not as grimy as the last one, but still the kind of place where the sheets smelled faintly of bleach and the art on the walls was bolted down. I checked in under a fake name, not because I was running from anyone, but because it felt like shedding my old skin. Daryl, the husband, was dead. Daryl, the guy who made coffee for no one, had to figure out who the hell he was now. Inside the tiny room, I collapsed onto the bed and stared at the ceiling. No plans, no future mapped out. Just me, a bag of clothes, a wallet that felt too light, and a heart that still beat out of stubborn habit. And for the first time, I didn't immediately reach for my phone. I didn't check for messages. I didn't wonder what Claire was doing. I just lay there, letting the emptiness wrap around me like a blanket. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it was real, and real was better than lies. The morning sunlight filtered weakly through the yellowed curtains of the motel room, casting long, soft lines across the bed. I woke up to the sound of gulls crying somewhere in the distance and the faint smell of salt in the air. For the first time in what felt like forever, waking up didn't feel like dragging a corpse out of bed. I sat up slowly, feeling the stiffness in my muscles. But something was different. The crushing weight I had carried for so long had shifted, eased like a bandage finally peeling away from a wound that was starting to scab over. I splashed cold water on my face in the tiny bathroom sink and caught my reflection in the cracked mirror. I looked like hell. Bloodshot eyes, rumpled clothes, stubble creeping along my jaw. But under all that, there was something else. Something quieter. A man who had survived. I didn't know exactly what came next. I wasn't naive enough to think that healing was a straight line or that the hurt would magically disappear. It would linger, sometimes sharp, sometimes dull, but it would no longer define me. I got dressed properly this time, no more pajama pants and yesterday's regrets, and walked down to the tiny coffee shop across the street. It smelled like fresh brewed coffee and baked goods. And for the first time in months, the smell didn't make my stomach churn. It made me smile. I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, watching the town come alive outside. Kids on bikes. An old couple walking hand in hand. A teenager walking a scruffy dog. Life. Ordinary, beautiful life. The woman behind the counter, a kind-looking lady in her 50s with bright eyes and a messy bun, smiled at me when she brought over a second cup of coffee, unasked. "You look like you could use another one, sweetheart," she said warmly. I laughed, an actual real laugh, and thanked her. And in that moment, sitting there with the sun warming my face and the simple comfort of a stranger's kindness filling my chest, I realized something important. Claire hadn't broken me. She had freed me from years of trying to hold together something that had already fallen apart. Freed me from carrying both sides of a relationship on my back. Freed me from being invisible in my own life. The betrayal hurt, sure, but it also cracked open the walls I had built around myself. Walls that had kept me trapped in a love that no longer loved me back. Now I had space. Space to figure out who I was without her. Space to rebuild, to dream, to live. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. I sipped my coffee, savoring the bitterness. And for the first time, it didn't taste like regret. Tasted like a beginning. Somewhere out there, Claire was waking up to a new life too. Maybe she was happy. Maybe she wasn't. It didn't matter anymore. I wasn't her husband. I wasn't her mistake. I wasn't her safety net. I was Daryl, still standing, still breathing, still here. And no matter what came next, I knew this much. I would be okay.